borrowed, I guess. Take off the sound. So what is work? Close. So physics, this is the physics definition of work. Product of the force applied to an object and the distance to which the force is applied. That makes sense? Yeah. So if I mow on the lawn, am I doing work? Yeah. If I'm lifting weights, am I doing work? If I'm moving furniture up and down a flight of stairs, am I doing work? If I'm pushing against the locked door, am I doing work? No.
You can jump in and out.
You have a force, but you don't have a what? You don't have a distance. So work is force applied over a distance, right? You understand? So if force is equal to force times distance, if distance is 0, then how much work are you getting? No. Swinging a golf club.
Yep.
So this guy must be mute, powerful. So how do we calculate work? Now work is force times distance. So we have to have a force, and we always have to move. It has to move something, right? You understand? So what is a force? Well, we can have a force without work. So force is just something that would tend or try to change, put something in motion. That's all. It doesn't mean it's going to do it, but it does what? Tries to do it. All or part of the force must be applied in the direction of the move. Do you do more work when you finish a job faster? No. Right? You understand? So work does not involve time, only force and distance. So if you cut the same grass, no work is done when you stand in place holding an object. Like we said, work is equal to what? Force times distance. And of course, the international standard for work is the Newton meter. And of course, what we use over here, the U.S. customary, is foot pounds. Pounds times feet, but we call it foot pounds. We abbreviated F/pound, right? Okay, y'all probably heard that before. Are we okay? So we don't need to know about the joule. Power. How quickly work is done. So what that means is that if I cut a lawn faster, I develop more power, but we do the same work. Does that make sense?
So time is a factor then?
In power, time is a factor. And we even see that with our formula for power, or formula for power in fluid power, but in electricity, it's force times speed, right? Because the more distance you travel, the faster the speed for the same amount of time. Does that make sense? The amount of work per unit of time. So here time comes into play with power, right? You understand? Not with work, with what? With power. If two people mow 2 lawns of equal size and one does the job in half the time, who does the most work? Neither one of them. One of them produces more power, right? You understand. The one that does it faster does it in a faster time. Same work, different power. Everybody okay? Makes sense? So power is equal to work over time. So the watt, we know about watt, right? We don't even know about that. So he did invent the Stevens. So watts. What is watts? It's a measurement of power, right? Well, so that's what we pay for. When you pay your power bill, of course, we know in electricity to get watts, we have to do what? We have to have voltage, and the voltage has the cost. So that's force, right? You understand? But I don't get power unless I get time, right? You understand that? So we hours. 1 horsepower, we talked about this. So horsepower in electrical terms is 745 or 746. Well, most of us use 746 watts per horsepower. How'd they come up with that? The term horsepower was developed by the quality of power. So a strong horse could move 550-pound objects 1 meter in 1 second. So it was all average, by the way. They used a bunch of horses. And I think they were the same type of horse. And then they had them pull this way. And then they measured it, right, over a certain distance. And what did we do this for? Anybody remember that? So what brought about the term horsepower? What invention brought about the term horsepower? The steam engine brought up the term horsepower. Because the problem that they had having was that's all people knew was horses, right? How much work a horse could do. So what they're trying to do is to relate how much work what a steam engine could do relative to a horse. So if you said it did 50 horsepower, people would say, oh, okay, I know what 50 horses could do, right? So what is a machine? What are machines?
They are operated by motors.
So machines are basically, so you'll get the right idea. These are the devices that makes our work easy. Machine can change the size, direction, or distance over which a force acts. So we have input force, and then we have output force. So input force is how much force we're putting in the machine, and output force is how much force we're getting out of the machine. And what is a force? What is force? It's a pressure that does what? Changes a device's directions or tries to change a device's direction. So we can have a force without work, but we can't have work without a force, right? Does that make sense? So like I say, I come up here and I push up against this wall, I'm generating a force, but I can't make the wall move. So I'm technically not doing any work. So the output force would be the force applied by the machine. But we're not going to change, the machine is not going to change the work. So technically, if the machine was 100% efficient, the work I get in would be the what? The work I get out, right? Y'all understand? 2 forces thus far. We have types of forces, right? Work input, and then work output. So this is the work done by the machine. Work input is what we put into the machine, right? So all the machine does is take a force, an input force, and then do something with the output, right? Everybody okay? That makes sense? But work is the same. So if our device increases, if our device increases work, I'm sorry, if it increases force, then it's got to decrease distance, right? You understand that? If it decreases force, then it's going to have to increase distance. That makes sense? Because work in equals work out. That makes sense? So what we're saying is if work in, so work in equals work out. So work in would be equal to force times distance. Work out would be equal to force times distance. Everybody okay? That makes sense. Can y'all see that? Probably need a different color. Probably white would work better. So work in would be equal to force times distance. And then work out would be equal to force times distance. Well, if over here, if I have a 5 times 5, and we're just making up numbers, would equal to what? Let's do it easier. Let's do an even number. So let's do 10 times 10, which of course would equal to what? 100. Well, that means my output has to equal to 100, right? You understand? That makes sense. So it means over here, if I get 5 force, then my distance is going to have to be what? 20 units.
You said this was a meter time or per second force. You said it's 10 what?
Anything, right? So let's say 10 pounds moves me 10 feet. Okay. On the other one, if I move 20 feet, then that means my force is going to have to go down to 5 pounds, right? If input force and output force is different. So what's going to happen, these machines are either going to increase force or they're going to decrease force. But if I decrease force, then what's going to happen is the distance or the speed is going to do what? It's going to go up, right? You understand that? If I increase force, did I say that right? If I increase force, then distance is going to have to go down if my machine increases force, right? If it decreases force, then what's going to happen is my distance is going to go up, or my speed. Y'all understand speed and distance are directly proportional. If you double the distance in the same amount of time, then what does that mean? Then you got to be going twice the speed, right? You understand that? So normally we deal with speed and not, so distance would work out the same way. Can you get more work out than you put in? No. You can't, because work out equals work in. People don't understand that, right? So you're not increasing work, right? You understand that? Yeah, but you're not, when you get a mechanical advantage, if we increase force, it's going to decrease speed. Right? You understand? If we decrease force, it's going to increase, because work in is supposed to equal work out, period. Right? You understand? So that means if I increase force, I'm going to decrease distance. And you see this all the time on levers, right? You understand? You're out there pumping your car up, you're getting a mechanical advantage. You're over here doing this, swinging this thing 4 feet, and how far does your car move? 1 inch, right? So what you're doing is you're putting the same amount of work in, but you're increasing the force, but you're sacrificing what? Distance, right? Ever get more work out than you put in. Never. In fact, you get less work out. Work output can never be what? Can never be greater than work input. It can be less, but it can't be what? Greater. In fact, it's always less. And why is that? Why is work out always less than work in? Because of the efficiency of the system, right? Nothing's 100% efficient. Mechanical advantage expresses the ratio with no units. So mechanical advantage is just a multiplier, right? You understand, in order to divide. The number of times the machine multiplies the input force. And so mechanical advantage is what? Output force over input force. Everybody okay? That makes sense. Pretty simple. We have ideal. So ideal, there's no friction involved in all. It's calculated differently for each machine. Of course, it depends on whether you're dealing with gears or levers or whatever. But it's always output force over input force, right? Does that make sense? Usually input distance, actual. So the way we do actual, we take the ideal force and then we multiply it by the efficiency of the machine. Are we okay? Makes sense. They left something off. So mechanical advantage, if it's got a mechanical advantage of 1, what does that mean? It means your output force and your input force will be the same. If it's got a mechanical advantage of greater than 1, it means your output force is going to be what? Greater. And then, of course, mechanical advantage of less than 1, what does that mean? What do you mean? Well, what the mechanical advantage is going to give us is we can take force out over force in, or we can use links too, by the way. We'll look at that in a minute. What it tells us is what happens to the force. So if I've got a mechanical advantage of greater than 1, work out equals work in, right? You understand that? Let's just use ideal for a little while and let's don't worry about the efficiency of the machine. If work out equals work in, that means if I have a mechanical advantage of 1, then the work I'm getting out is exactly would be equal to the work I'm getting in. If I have a mechanical advantage of greater than 1, and I said that a little wrong, it means the force I'm getting out is the same I'm putting force in. So if the work is the same, it means if I have a mechanical advantage of 1, then my distance on my output would be exactly the same as my distance on the input, right? You understand? It would move the same length. If my mechanical advantage is greater than 1, it means my force output is greater than my force input, which means what had to change? No, work is not going to, y'all, distance is going to have to change. So if I get more force out, that means it's going to travel over a smaller distance, right? Y'all understand that? Yes or no? And you see this all the time, and that's what we was talking about. So when I'm jacking up a car, guys, I'm putting enough work over here to raise that car. But I can't go over there and grab that car and pick it up, right? Because I don't get a what? A mechanical advantage. So going through a lever system, I'm over here going over 4 feet, right, on my side over here. And how far is the car moving? It might be moving less than an inch, right? You understand? So I'm over here giving 100 pounds of force over 4 feet. This car's moving an inch over here, right? Y'all understand? So 4 feet, how many inches would that be? Okay, it would be 60 feet. So that means I'm getting 60 times the force on the output, right? So if I'm putting 100 pounds over here, I'm getting 600 pounds of force on the other side. But it's only moving what? It's only moving 1 inch, right? You understand that? Of course, there's more to it. We go through a hydraulic pump in there that also gives us an advantage. But technically, if the system was 100% efficient, then work out and work in are equal to each other, right? So if I increase force on my output, then what's got to change? The distance that it actually moves, right? And we see this all the time in an increased distance analogy. So if it's less than 1, then our force is going to go down, but our speed is going to go up, right? You understand? That makes sense. So here they're using a seesaw. You know, we got to see any seesaws, y'all, especially in the parks. What did y'all have the ability to do? Had like 4 little notches in it that you could do what? You could change it. If you put it in the center, then that means you and your partner weighed about the same, right? You understand? And how could you do that? Well, you'd sit on each side, and if the seesaw didn't move, y'all know y'all were the same way. But if the other person weighed more than you, then what did you do? You gave him the shorter side and you took the longer side. So you went on a what? You had more distance, but you generated what? Enough force to cause a seesaw. So this would be a rake. Would be a good example of we get a speed advantage, right? If we grab it on the end. A better example is baseball player. So what they're doing, they're back here and they're swinging like this, and the tip of that bat is falling over what? More distance, right? You understand that? So, but we decrease force, but we get higher. Efficiency can never be greater than 100% or greater than 1. So efficiency is always going to be a fraction. And why? Because there is no such thing as a machine that is 100% efficient. We always have some type of friction, something rubbing against something, right? You understand that? Work is always needed to overcome the machine itself, a percentage of comparison of work. So if I take the work out over the work in, that should give me my efficiency of my machine. That makes sense? We okay? So the first thing we'll look at is levers. Y'all know, understand what a lever is. We have 3 classes of levers. And why I'm laughing is that this was on the MSSE test. So anybody know the three classes of levers? Okay, so what do we need to make a lever? Well, we got to have a bar that moves about a fixed point. We call the fixed point is the fulcrum, right? The pivot point of the lever, there are 3 classes of lever of which you'll look at. So this is the one we're more familiar with. This is a first class or class 1 lever. The fulcrum is located between the effort arm and the resistance. Makes work easier, but what it does is it changes direction. So what's an example of a first class lever? We've already, seesaw is a first class lever. That's first class lever. Pliers are first class levers. So your effort is out here. So this would be your fulcrum. This would be your effort. This is where you're going. So what we're doing is we got this distance over here, and then we have this, right? So what happens is I'm over here on the back of my hand, and I'm doing a very long distance over here to get a very short distance over there, right? You understand? So these guys are normally force multipliers, but they change the direction. So scissors, or everybody's used crowbar, or nail pullers. You ever tried to pull a nail out with your fingers? So what we do is we have these crowbars, or we have nail pullers where you have a longer handle and a real short handle, right? You understand that? And so you're moving a great distance over here just to pull the nail out of what? A little bit, but you get a force multiplier. Second class levers. So everybody okay on first class levers? So how would you calculate the force? This would be a force multiplier. What do you need? What can you do to calculate the force? Anybody know how to calculate the force on these first class levers? So what we would do, and it's really simple, guys, is we come over here and we have our fulcrum, and then we have a lever. Okay. Or this makes up a lever. Over here, this would be what I'm trying to move, and then I would be applying the force over there. Okay. So let's say this right here is 6 feet, and this over here is 2 feet. Well, what I would do is this would give me a mechanical advantage of, what do you think we'd do with those 2 numbers? So which side is going to move further, huh? Divide what by what? Divide the 6 by the 2. That's exactly right. So this guy would give us a mechanical advantage of 3. So what that means is that if I put 100 pounds of force on the long side, I could be able to develop a 300 pounds of force on the output side. So what you do to calculate it is you take your input, take your input length, and divide that by your what? Your output length. And that's the way you calculate the mechanical advantage of this guy, of a class 1 lever. But the problem is, if this right over here moves 8 feet, if this over here moves 9 feet, then this over here would actually move what? If this moves 9 feet, then this over here would move 3. Because what we did is we multiplied the force. So what do we have to do? We have to divide the distance. Does that make sense? So the ratio of the long side divided by the short side would give you the mechanical advantage. Now, mechanical advantage, we mean how much force it would be, but if the force goes up, the distance is going to go down by the exact same ratio, right? Y'all understand that? Does this make sense? So how many of y'all played around with a class 1 lever? Everybody's seen the lever, right? I had my ride lawnmower. I had one of these 0 turn radius lawnmowers, and I was cutting my son's grass. And they got a above ground swimming pool, and it empties. When they empty anything out of it, it runs down into a little gully right there. And I was cutting grass, and I went through there with my lawnmower, and guess what happened? I got stuck, and it was all the way up to the axle. So what I did was I went over there and got me a big old long 2x4 over there, and I used a class 2 lever. Resistance is found between the fulcrum and the effort arm. So the effort arm, the resistance arm is where the load's at, right? Understand? The effort arm is where I'm putting the pressure on. So here it makes it easier by multiplying effort and force, but it doesn't change direction. So a door is a class 1 lever. Nutcrackers are class 1 levers. Wheelbarrows are, class 2. What I used to use a big old 2x4. So the back of my lawnmower was back here, and if you're familiar with a 0 turn radius, that's where all your weight's at, right? That's where your motor's at, or your engine. And all I did was get that big old, so the back of my lawnmower was back here, and there's a big old wheels I can draw. Yeah. And of course, then it had the thing back, and then it had a thing that goes up. And then my big old motor was sitting right there. Well, I just took that big old 2x4, and it was about, I guess it was about 6 feet long. This might have been a 1. This might have been 1 feet. That means I had 5 feet up here. I had 1 feet when it dug into the ground. Here was my fulcrum right there. That's what was doing the work, right? You understand? I'm sorry. Here's my fulcrum right here. This is where the weight applied. So what I did is I had 1 foot right there. I had 5 feet right there. So this gave me a force multiplier of what? 5. So I just dug that big old board in the ground, and then I pushed up to it, and it raised my tractor up, and I moved it about 6 inches. And then I had to keep having to do what? I did it, but class 2 lever got me out of that situation, right? So class 2 levers, class 2 levers, or second class lever, then your effort, your fulcrum is where? Is on the end, so there's the fulcrum. Here's my resistance, and here's my effort. Of course, he would get, or he or whoever this was, would get a lot more force the further back on the effort that they're submitting, right? So right there, here, they would only get this effort right here. So what you need to do is the further you get back on that, it's just like on your pliers. The more force you want to generate, the further you get back on that handle, right? You understand? Or even a ratchet wrench is a class 2. I'm sorry, a ratchet wrench is a class 1. So class 3 levers, third class levers. This is where your baseball bats come into play, your rakes come into play, different things that we use. Oops. What's that? Only if you use one, maybe. But a pulley is a different type of machine. It's not considered a lever. It's considered a... So the effort is located between the resistance and the force. So let's see it. So here, if this is your fulcrum, and then you come over here, that's not true. Here's your weight, and then here, right here, is your effort. And this right here is your resistance. So it means I would come over here and I might pull up right there. So I'm sorry, I'm drawing that the wrong way. I might pull this up right here. Now what I'm getting out here is I'm getting greater distance, right? You understand? But what am I sacrificing? Force. So what here, I would come up here, and if this was 1 foot, and then this right here was 5 feet, and what this would be is this would be 1 divided by 5. So that's how much my force would decrease, but my distance would increase by 5, right? That makes sense? So a baseball bat is a really good tendency. So out there on the end of the baseball bat is you're not getting all the force. It takes a lot of force, but you're getting a lot of what? Speed or distance, yeah. Because if distance goes up, speed's got to go up, right? Understand that? So there's our 3 classes of levers. Class 1 lever. One thing that a class 1 lever does, basically class 1 and class 2 levers are almost the same. It's just the location of the fulcrum. We both get a force multiplier, but a class 1 actually changes direction. So when you push down on a class 1 lever, then your force will be on the other side is going to be generated up, right? You understand that? Everybody okay? A class 2 lever, we still get a force multiplication, which means if we get a force multiplication, we lose distance. But a class 2 lever, your direction would be the same. A class 3 lever is we get a force divider, but we get a speed multiplier or a distance multiplier. Everybody understand that? Yes or no? These and apply these to our different machines. So these are all class 3. And here they are right here. Are all okay? Does that make sense? Everybody okay? This is arm length divided by output arm's length, and then that would give us our mechanical advantage. I didn't know this thing made all this noise. So this is our levers. The other thing we have is wheels, right? Everybody okay here? So this is another basic machine. It's a lever that rotates in a circle. A combination of 2 wheels of different sizes. What's the 2 wheels? Or 2 round things in different. So what does a wheel mount on? An axle. Well, axle is a wheel also, right? So axle is something, a wheel is something that's round and rotates or has the ability to rotate. So all your wheels mount on an axle. So the axle is technically a wheel. And then we mount the wheel on the axle. So it's a combination of two wheels. And what we know is our axle will always be smaller than our wheel, right? Make sense? Yes? Smaller wheel, the smaller wheel is, we call that a what? Axle. So our mechanical advantage would be the radius of the wheel divided by the radius of the axle. So the bigger the wheel is and the smaller the axle is, the more mechanical advantage it is. Right? Everybody understand that? An inclined plane, this is our other wheel. So we have levers, then we have wheels, and then we have inclined planes. Everybody understand what an inclined plane is? So how do you calculate the mechanical advantage of an inclined plane? We're moving something over distance. If we get a mechanical advantage, what we're going to do is we're either going to decrease force. So an inclined plane is going to decrease force, right? You understand that? So this is why when you're going to pull a heavy logic in the back of a truck, they either put a lift or they put an inclined plane back there. So what you're doing though is that you're taking something that would come up. Let's say I had to raise something 4 feet. And most of these you can just about, so let's say I had to raise something 4 feet. And it weighs 400 pounds. So that was going to require work. We have a force, right? We have 400 pounds. But if I was going to do this, that means I would have to be able to lift what? 400 pounds over. So let's say I come over here and what did I say? This was 4 feet. Well, let's say I come up here and I put an inclined plane up here. And it's going to have to be 4 feet high, right? You understand? But then I come over here and I spread that over 12 feet. So what I've done, instead of moving it 4 feet, I'm going to have to move it 12 feet now, right? You understand? To raise it up, what, 4 feet. What would you think the mechanical advantage would be? Divided by the height. Yeah, so the mechanical advantage on the incline is the length, right? Good. I said y'all could probably figure that. Divided by the what? The height, yeah. So this would have a mechanical advantage of what? 3. Right? You understand? So that means now it would take me whatever. So I'd take 400 divided by 3. And what would that give me? Huh? 133 pounds to move 400 pounds weight. So the further we spread the incline out, right, you understand that, then the better the mechanical advantage would get. So the mechanical advantage on the incline would just be the what? The length of the incline divided by the height of the incline. So here they're using ladders. So ladders are just, steps are just kind of like inclines, right? And of course, ladders. Then of course we got a wedge. This is a simple machine. What do we use wedges for? Chopping wood. That's exactly right. Anywhere else? Electric razors, right?
Oh.
Yeah, chopping wood. Knives, any knives uses an incline. We're chopping it to a point. What we do is we get the mechanical advantage of the wedge, right? Y'all understand that? So we're splitting things apart a different distance, and then we're also getting the mechanical advantage of the incline. Then we have the screw. What's a screw? It's an inclined plane that's wrapped around the metal. That's all it is. Right? You understand that? So a screw is an inclined plane wrapped around the cylinder. The closer the threads, the greater the mechanical advantage. So you have narrow thread screws, you got bigger thread screws, right? You understand that? Examples, bolts, augers, and drill bits. Then we have a simple pulley. This is what Justin was talking about. A chain, a belt, or a rope wrapped around a wheel either can change the direction or the amount of effort or force. Flag clothes, blinds, curtains, right? Of course, we have a lot more than that. Pulleys, these pulleys can only do what? Change directions. They don't change force because it moves at the same distance, right? So if you got one pulley, if you're pulling over here 1 foot, it's going to move up what? 1 foot. It is changing the direction, right? Because when we pull down on this side, it does what on the other side? Pulls up. But we're still, the work in here would be equal to the work out. Then what happens is, and we need to just go, and you see this all the time. So all this guy here is the applied force would be equal to the work force. If I had 2 pulleys, if I had a second pulley, right, you understand, then what we're going to do is we're going to get what? We're going to multiply the force by 2, but what happens to the distance? Everybody did this. So I'll come over here and I move it 1 foot. How far would my load move over there? Half a foot, right? That's exactly right. So the more pulleys you add and string them together like this, the advantage you get, but what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice distance, right? If work out equals work in, but less distance. Yeah, I don't know if y'all played around with these multi-pulley systems. You're over here doing this, and we get a mechanical advantage over here. You're over here pulling on that door, and you pull back, you pull down 4 feet, and the dang thing moves 1 foot, right? You understand? Because what we're doing is I couldn't go out there and do what? I couldn't grab the bottom of that board, go and do what? Lift it up. But if I've got a system that gives me a mechanical advantage, either through gears or whatever, then if I sacrifice distance, then I can increase what? Force. Y'all got the basic idea of a machine. I mean, no matter what we get into, if you understand, number one, is I can get more force out if I decrease what? Distance, or if I decrease speed. Now, you understand speed and distance are the same. Because if I cover more distance if I cover more distance, the same distance in less time, that means I'm doing what? I'm creating this. Yeah. So what we're saying is that as speed goes up, distance goes up. If I double my speed, then I would go twice the distance. So when we start looking at motors, we're not going to be looking at distance. We're going to be looking at speed, right? Or gears. We're not looking at how far the gear turns. We're looking at how much do I get out if I get in. So if a gear decreases the speed, it's going to increase the what? The force. If work out equals work in. Right? You understand that? And that's what gearbox is. So those are basic machines, guys. So what's the basic machines? Levers, right? Wheels, inclines, right? And then wedges, which is basically two inclines on each side, right? Screws, these are nothing but inclines wrapped around a circle. All y'all seen screws before. And then pulleys. Are we okay? That makes sense?
Leaders don't actual way.
Wheel, no, it's not axle. A wheel is a basic machine. Okay. Normally we combine a wheel with an axle. So usually a wheel consists of an axle, two wheels, right? Consists of an axle and a wheel itself. That makes sense? Wedges and pulleys, right? So tell me what you know about gears.
Go around and you have to have two operating.
So what do we use gears for?
The turn,
Well, I could turn things without a gear. I mean, I could definitely turn things without a gear.
their turn, and they usually make things go a distance, right?
What we're going to do, we're going to use gears for one of two things. We're going to use them to increase torque, or we're going to use them to increase speed. Right? That's what we use gears for, period. Because you say it, you use them to turn things. Well, I can turn things with a motor, right? You understand? But the problem is I might not be able to generate enough force to turn what I need to turn. So I could run it through a gearbox, and I could increase force and do what? Decrease what? Speed.
I know that in order to increase the speed, you have to have side gears, right? Larger gears.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a gear by itself. You are exactly right there. We wouldn't have one gear without having another type of gear, right? So we're gonna have to have two gears. Yeah, but we wouldn't necessarily. We wouldn't use a gear if the workout I wanted to be the work in, then we probably wouldn't use the gear. So we use gears to get a mechanical advantage. We're either going to get a advantage of speed, or we're going to get an advantage of what? Torque. So torque is a twisting motion. So that's the difference between speed and force. So I'm coming over here, and this is gears right here. So this is a gearbox right here, a gear train. And over here, I can take this and I can stop this motor. But look how fast this guy here is running. This is the output right here. And I can't do what? I can't stop this. So notice over here, this guy here is screaming. This guy here is going a lot slower. So this right here would be a force multiplier, right? Or torque multiplier. So if I knew the speed, if I knew the gear ratio, in fact I do. This is 65.5 to 1, 65.5 to 1 gears ratio. So that means I'm creating whatever force this motor's creating, the torque, I multiply that by 65.5. Whatever speed this is running at it, I would divide it by 65.5 to find out how fast this is running, right? You understand that? So once you know the advantage, then you can calculate the force or you can calculate the speed. So if it multiplies the force, it's going to divide the speed by the exact same ratio, right? Y'all understand? So good gracious, if this guy right here was only putting out 1 pound of force, then over here I'd be getting 65.5 pounds of force out of it. But look at the difference. I can just come over here and stop it. I don't need to do that very long. But I can just come over and do what? I have no problem at all. But I cannot stop this side right here. That hurts. Because why? I'm getting a what? A mechanical advantage. So the speed is this guy's running 65.5 times faster than this guy right here.
What happens if how long to it?
Oh, yeah, that's why I don't want to hold it very long. So what a motor does is when it's running, when it starts, it needs a lot of torque. So we call it the starting current. The starting current is a lot higher than what the motor takes when it runs, right? You understand? If you don't know the starting torque, we say it's about 6 to 8 times the full run current. So if this motor right here pulls 1 amp, then it would pull between 6 and 8 amps just to get it what? Started. So that's a gearbox. So are we okay so far? Lost anybody?